The Utah Jazz now have a clear defined route to respectability, importance, and winning basketball. But there are many pitfalls on the route. Next on Locked on Jazz.
You are Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
How are you? I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. This is Locked On Jazz. It's your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all podcasting apps, as well as YouTube. And to the everydayers, you're the greatest. Thank you for making the show what it is. Here's what we got today. We'll wrap up with a thought on Jaden Springer. The Jazz released him. It's not a big deal. It's just I find him fascinating. The Jazz under Austin Ainge have now built a route, and it's clear what we're trying to do on how to be good. And one of the most frequently asked questions I get is, when are we going to be good again? So let's walk through what it's going to take, but there are numerous sharks and pitfalls along the way in this route for the Utah Jazz. All right, so the model when we started this rebuild three and a half years ago and traded Donovan and Rudy, the concept was, at least in the way I presented it, was you need a top 10, a top 20, and a top 50 player in the NBA. And that was true until the teeth of this new collective bargaining agreement got onto the league this year. And now I do not believe that to be the case anymore. It's a little different now. We're going to see as it evolves. But my feeling is you still need a top 10. If you look at the top best teams last year, the Final Four, Shea, Brunson, Halliburton, Ant, and Donovan and Tatum in the East, and LeBron or Luka maybe for LA, you still had that. And Kawhi, when he was on for part of last year, is obviously close. It's where you still have to have that guy. That's, I don't think, going to change in the game of basketball anytime soon. Part two, though, is different now. I don't think Oklahoma City has a top 20 player. I'm not sure the Knicks have a top 20 player. I'm not sure Indiana has a top 20 player. And I'm not sure Minnesota has a top 20 player. I'm not sure you have top 10, top 20, and top 50. I think you have top 10. And then I think we're going to call it you have high-level depth. You've heard the phrase I use a lot, 240 minutes. You've got to have 240 minutes. There's no question on that now. If you have a gap in having 240 minutes, which is 48 minutes times 5, so you have complete NBA players for all those minutes, you've got, I think it's too big a hurdle to get over and come in a 7-game series. I think we saw that last year. New York had 240. Minnesota had Minnesota all year long, I was like, have the best 8-man rotation in the league. Oklahoma City had Shea and then had 240. And clearly Indiana did too. So I think that's the new model. Rather than a top 20 and a top 50, it's high-level depth that fit inside of the new salary structure with a hard second cap or second apron, and you work with that. So how do the Jazz get there? And what is this route that Austin Ainge, to me, has clearly now defined? And then what's it going to take? So the first one, obviously, is the top 10 player. And that's the hurdle. That's the biggest. That's not a hurdle. That's Mount Everest. These other ones are hurdles. That's actually what's interesting about this now. What I used to say is you probably had to climb Everest, McKinley, and Rainier. Now you've got to climb Everest because you got to get a top 10 player. But then the other ones are not that big a deal. If you manage your team right, I think you can find them and do them. So how do the Jazz get a top 10 player in the NBA? It has to be out of our draft. We do not have a player on our roster other than Ace Bailey who might be a top 10 player in the NBA. And so it's out of our 2025 pick, which is Ace Bailey, our 2026 pick, which is going to be top 5, and probably our 2027 pick and hopefully not our 2028 pick. But the fact is, when you draft early, you're hitting kind of every other pick there, maybe 2/3 of your picks. And to get one of them to be a top 10 pick is even harder. But that's where a lot of them come from, right? 50% of the guys I just mentioned, if you actually run through the guys I mentioned before, it's a little over 50% of the guys I mentioned are top picks, right? Ant, Donovan, Tatum, LeBron, Luka, like those guys that's where they're picked. If you can go get a Brunson somewhere, that's amazing. But your best chance is to do it by drafting early. So Ace Bailey is our first chance. Our second chance is whoever we draft next year. Everyone, the minute I say that, you all think AJ immediately. Fine. Think AJ in your head. And then the question is, does it take a 2027 pick or a 2028 pick because you didn't hit? There's pitfall number one. Is that we could be in this cycle of having to try to grab that player for a while. There's no other route to get that top 10 player for us. It doesn't exist. So pitfall number one is for us to get there is that you don't hit on a top 10 player in your early draft picks, which is actually really hard to do. The other pitfall here is that you have to make a call on whether you have that top 10 player. And if you call wrong and start to move the chips in before you have that guy, then you're really stuck. This is, to me, the biggest pitfall that exists. So if you look at Shea, I think Shea became an all-star in like his 4th year. And you look at Halliburton, he became an all-star in his 5th year. And you look at Tatum, he became an all-star in his 3rd year. So you know pretty early on these guys. But let's say Ace Bailey has a good rookie year, but we're not quite sure yet. And then Ace Bailey gets into his 2nd year, and he's pretty damn good. And we're like, okay, we got a piece. And AJ is in his 1st year. At the end of that 2nd year, like, are you sure? Because you're not. But you kind of have to go at some point. So pitfall number one in this process is that you have these young pieces and you're 1 year in of the 2025 pick and the 2026 pick. And you probably at that point still get a pretty good 2027 pick. I'm pretty certain we're going to have 3 top 5 picks in a row here. And you're going to hope 2 of those hit. And you're probably going to have to go chips in or start the process of chips in while you have those 3 guys at year 2, year 1, and not played yet. And you're not entirely sure whether or not they're that good yet. And if you're wrong, then it's a huge problem anyway, because you've missed on top 5 picks. Now you're going to be Washington or Sacramento for a while. And you actually have to do it kind of Orlando did, which is Orlando did this, realized they didn't have it, pivoted out of it, went back into and now have come back with Paulo Banchero and Franz Wagner. If you go back and look at Orlando, they go in, they think they're coming out, they realize, oh crap, we don't have it. They go back down, and then they come back up again. So there's pitfall number one. That's length. That's some time that it's going to take too, right? If Ace Bailey is everything, it all comes together, maturity clicks in, and a lot of ifs, he's an all-star by year 4. He's an all-star by the season that finishes in 2030. If AJ or Boozer or whoever our pick is for, and we have an exciting draft announcement coming on Locked On here shortly. Whoever that is, that's 2031 probably before they're an all-star, and probably 2030 before you know. So there's pitfall number one, is that you're in this process that we've built. You're going to have to go in stages 2 and 3 prior to really knowing whether you have the pieces. And going early can be super detrimental. But the time by which you go may not be necessarily dictated by your talent. That's next on Locked On Jazz. Monday edition of Locked On Jazz is brought to you by Murdoch Chevy, located in Logan and in Woods Cross. The Chevy truck is everything you could ever imagine, from the Colorado, which is the zippy, fun little truck that gets all your utility stuff done, to the Silverado, sitting up top in the King Poobah like on a lazy boy chair, what's the word I'm looking for? Perusing the scene from the top of power in your Silverado. Plus the great lineup of SUVs, the Blazer and the Trailblazers, the Utah County assault vehicles with the Tahoe, and the Suburban. It's all at Chevy, and Murdoch Chevy is there for you in Woods Cross and in Logan. If you're going to head over, let's get you the VIP treatment you deserve by being a Locked On everydayer. Email me at dlock09@gmail.com. That's dlock09@gmail.com so that we can get you your VIP experience at Murdoch Chevy. Today's show is also brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Time to fuel up and turn it up with 5 Hour Energy Transfusion. It brings the bold grape, ginger, and lime flavor to your favorite golf drink, minus the alcohol, into a quick, energizing shot. Whether you're sinking birdies or making memories with friends, this one's a hole-in-one for your energy game. Yeah, I'm bogey. Let's be honest. Some days on the course, you're just off. You need a little boost to stay sharp or energized. Some days you just need a little boost. So golf is all about good times and good people, good flavors, and of course, the grape ginger lime flavor gives you the best parts of Clubhouse to go without chasing down the Bev cart. If you go to 5hourenergy.com today, that is the number 5, hourenergy.com. So 5 and then hourenergy.com. You can use my promo code LOCKEDONGOLF to receive 20% off your order. The offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. So whether you're meeting up with friends, trying to turn 18 to 36, get energized, boost you need to power through. Hypothetically, after 7 holes, you're losing to your wife last night and you need to really focus. Order the transfusion-flavored 5 Hour Energy shots today at 5hourenergy.com. Promo code LOCKEDONGOLF. Thanks so much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. All right, so here's what's tricky. Part 2 of this is that you're using your cap space for your high-level depth. Okay, so you have used a trade exception. You, like John Collins, you've got a bunch of cap space, and you're going to use it, and that's where you're going to increase your depth. And then there's another mechanism we'll get to another. The biggest pitfall here is timing. Because the way this lines up, when you have Ace Bailey coming, we'll call it AJ again, and whoever the next guy is, those 3 guys coming, well, your trade exception expires coming up here. So by February of this year on the trade exception, the Jazz have to kind of make a decision. Are we using the trade exception to bail someone out of the luxury tax and gain assets, or are we trying to use the trade exception as a way to gain a talented player by July 7th of next year on the John Collins trade exception? We have a bunch of cap space available next year. We could roll it over, but you've got to get to the salary floor, so you're not going to be able to roll over a lot of it unless you sign a bunch of 1-year contracts. And so you're kind of forced to use it, but it's a little early to use it. Like, we'll only have 1 year of Ace Bailey. We've never seen draft pick 2026 play, and we'll never have seen draft pick 2027. We don't know who it is. We'll know who it is on 26. So it gets early there to start adding that depth in some of those ways. So that's the pitfall number 2, is the timing on this. It gets very, very difficult. The other key that's very clear to me, this is where I think this is exciting. So we literally have a path now. And then the other path of this is the building of your own high-level depth. And this is what I think you can really do as a team. The Knicks did it by trading and acquiring, but they use their assets to do it. Minnesota generally actually did a little bit of each. Jaden McDaniels was their draft pick, but Mike Conley was traded and acquired, and Rudy Gobert was traded and acquired. Nickeil Alexander, we'll talk about in a second. Indiana did a kind of combination of these two things. They drafted Miles a long time ago. They picked up Nebhard they drafted. So it's a little bit of both those things. But here's what gets exciting about this upcoming season for us. Which of our players that we have on the roster right now, sans Ace Bailey, can become that high-level depth? And that's where all these draft picks the Jazz have acquired to me, and these swings are important. Now, the Jazz have taken a little bit of an approach on the Phoenix when they trade the 3 picks for Phoenix is one that pick they need to have to try to be a top 10 player. That's trying to take a swing at an extra piece in 31 when you've started this process up, and then Phoenix is you're adding in a really good player to an emerging team in 31. That's an exciting possibility for the 31-32 season. But Walker, what we need to have happen here is Walker continues to grow into a bona fide, legitimate starting center in the NBA who plays 25, 30 minutes, has enough offensive skills, that concept. Lauri already has high-level depth. Might be a top 50 player in the NBA. Keyonte, we've talked about a lot this offseason, but ideally, Keyonte clicks in. But this is where you start to get into this scheme. And that is, if Keyonte doesn't get going, and doesn't become, that sets you back, right? I mean, the big setback is if Ace Bailey, 26 pick AJ, 27 pick don't pan out. That sets you back massively. Massively. But by the way, it's also why you got to shoot for Ace Bailey on the draft. Like if your other choices, Trey Johnson or Jeremiah Fears, like Ace Bailey has a chance to be a top 10 player in the NBA. I don't think the other guys do. That's why you got to shoot Ace Bailey with that 5th pick if he's there on the board. And so the same thing on a minor level is if, okay, we're 3 years in and we realize the ball's never going to go into, the defense is never going to happen. Well, that's a setback. Because then we look at that draft and we'll see what happens with Taylor. I think the expectations have dropped because of the injury, certainly. We'll see. But I also don't know that anyone ever thought Taylor Hendricks, with his lack of experiences, I think he's a rotation player in the NBA. I don't think anyone ever thought he was a top 10 player in the NBA. I don't think anyone ever thought he was going to be an all-star. So then you have, beyond Key, you've got Flip, Cody, Sensabaugh, Hendricks, Clayton, Collier. You've got 6 shots at guys becoming a rotation player in the NBA. Key to me is a little more advanced here. Key, you're really hoping like, okay, he can really score it. He can play off the bounce. He can do some things other players in the NBA can't do. He has some elite skills. And so can Key become top 6 guy on your roster, bona fide scorer, part of really a real piece? Same thing with Walker. And then you've got Lauri. Now you're beginning. So let's say Walker clicks. Let's say Lauri stays there. Let's say Keyonte begins to click. You've got 3 of those high-level depth pieces. If Ace is emerging, you're beginning to feel pretty good. And then, like, it all starts to come together a little bit. You don't need Flip, Cody, Sensabaugh, Hendricks, Clayton, Collier all to hit. And you don't need, their roles become smaller, which makes it more likely that they're going to hit. If you're suddenly asking Flip to be an 8th guy, I think he can probably do that. If you're asking Clayton to be a backup point guard, I think he can do that. If you're asking Clayton to be like a Nemhard, maybe he can do that. If you're asking Hendricks to be your 5th starter, I think he can do that. And then you start to piece in, this is where the trade exception and your cap space. And now you're bringing in, and like we like to talk about, but now you bring in the Jaylen Brown 2 years from now when Boston can't quite put it back together and they got to get off it. This is where you bring in, I don't know, it'd be kind of crazy, but like, I don't know why they'd ever get rid of him, but the Evan Mobley. Or someone who's probably going to be a top 20 player by then. So you know, that's where Jalen Williams decides, actually, I want my own team. And comes to play with his brother. I like that scenario. And that's how this thing starts to build. And this is what makes this upcoming season so exciting. For Flip, Cody, Sensabaugh, Hendricks, Clayton, and Collier, if Keyonte can go, it's an if, then what you're asking out of them gets to be less. If Keyonte doesn't, well, then all of a sudden, we need a really significant piece out of Flip, Cody, Sensabaugh, Hendricks, Collier, and Clayton. I don't know if they can do that. We don't know yet. I'm not saying they can't. I just said I don't know. And the ask is bigger. There's a nasty truth to how this gets successful also, and a hidden gem aspect. We'll get to that next on Locked on Jazz. The nasty truth element here is you got to get off guys. Truly, when you look back at what Oklahoma City did really, really well, is they got off guys. What, frankly, New York did pretty well. They got off some guys. What teams have a tendency to not do is get off guys. But on flip, Cody, Sensabaugh, Hendricks, Clayton, and Collier, you can have things you really like. Collier's speed, Bryce's shooting, Cody's length, Hendricks' body, Clayton's gumption, flips, offensive prowess. But as we've talked about, if they have something that jacks the game, a deficiency that really doesn't let you run your offense, or a deficiency that means your defensive schemes are blasted because people just go at them, and it's not going to work, get off them. Now, what's tricky on all those guys is because they've gotten time, they've shown some real promise. But if you run through Oklahoma City, Trey Mann, Theo Maledon, I can run the list, Jeremiah Robinson Earl, they got off guys. You've got to be willing to get off guys. The other one that Oklahoma City did brilliantly is Isaiah Joe, Kendrick Williams, Aaron Wiggins. Wiggins was a late second-round draft pick. Isaiah Joe and Kendrick Williams were free agents that Oklahoma City saw something in and let develop. And the key here is by getting off the other guys. Sung Jang. I can just run the list. Pokashevsky. I mean, they missed on a ton. They allowed these other players who they picked up as free agents, who they weren't as attached to emerge and develop and have a spot on their team. The Jazz tried it last year with KJ Martin and Jaden Springer. And they're trying it with Elijah Harkless. Who are these guys that you can find out there that have a role on your team when you get good that are free agent? And that role is probably at the end of the bench. Right? Kendrick Williams is not an every game player. Isaiah Joe was kind of in and out during the playoffs, but there for most of the regular season. It's pretty vital during the regular season. But those are interesting pieces, but they never happen. Aaron Wiggins is better than that. He's become a pure rotation player. They never happen unless you're willing to get off your guys, to open up the time and opportunity for these other guys, and you've got to be scouting brilliantly. Indiana did this. Indiana did this with Obi Toppin, Aaron Nesmith, where they went and grabbed players, second contract players that didn't pan out. That's as important here in the process, that not every one of these players has to come from your draft picks. They don't all have to be your own. Your front office has got to be willing to get off players. And I think that's cruel and unusual, but true. We'll see what Indiana does with Benedict Mathurin, but they dropped Chris Duarte fast. They got off Gogo Batazzi fast. They got off Aaron Holiday fast. They hit on Nembhard with the 31st pick. They hit on Mathurin as the 6th pick. They hit Shepard's been okay for them at the 26th pick. That was awfully nice. And they haven't picked for the last 2 years, basically. But that's going to be the other part that's just as interesting and as exciting in this upcoming season, is now that that path is clear, you have this group of guys flip. And this, again, what you're asking out of them, if Walker can emerge, if Lauri stays, if Keyonte emerges, Walker solidifies. Let's call Keyonte emerges, Walker solidifies. And one of your young guns that you're getting in over the next 2 or 3 seasons is going to be that guy. Now you don't need that many pieces in free agency if you're hitting on half of or even 2 of Flip, Cody, Sensabaugh, Hendricks, Clayton, and Collier. Right? If you have Ace Bailey and you've got 2026 draft pick AJ, and let's say they're both going to be great, and 27's pick busts because that's the reality. You're 67%. And you have Walker, and you have Lauri, and you have Keyonte. You now got 5. And you're going to add a free agent. That's 6. Maybe another. That's 7. And maybe that's second draft players, Obi Toppin or Aaron Nesmith for your 7. If you're 8, 9, and 10, I only need 3 of Flip, Cody, Sensabaugh, Hendricks, Clayton, and Collier. Only need 3 out of 6. Maybe only 2. If I get 4, then the free agent I sign I can spend more money on it. Because I have more players under salary control that are good enough to play that I can go get. I can overplay Isaiah Hartenstein $30 million. I can go trade for Alex Caruso and overpay him. That's the model. That's the route that has been built here. And the pitfalls are real. The pitfall 1 is you've probably got to move forward before you know if your young guys hit top 3-5, but you got to hit on them. Pitfall 2 is whether or not you can get the timing right. Pitfall 3 is whether you're willing to get off your guys. Pitfall 4 is just still that Utah thing of whether we're going to be able to sign that free agent. We just got to be honest about that. Like, that's using the cap space and the extension. That we don't know yet. Indiana didn't really do that. Oklahoma City did it with Hartenstein and Caruso. New York obviously did it with much higher players in trades and deals. All right, I want to wrap on Jaden Springer. One, because I thought he was delightful. So it's too bad that he, and my smiley face was not about Jaden Springer being cut. And I think that Jaden Springer is exactly kind of what we're talking here. The Jazz took a shot at him. They had him in for a little bit. His shooting's just not good enough. And they cut him. What's crazy about Jaden Springer is he's 22 years old. He was the 28th pick of the 2021 draft, 4 drafts ago. And as we sit here 4 years later on the 28th of July, he is out of the NBA. Like, it happens fast. I'm not saying this story to me is not truly about Jaden Springer, but this is a kid who is a McDonald's All-American, had every accolade, went to Tennessee, had a fairly decent year. He actually shot 44% from 3. And whatever reason, got to the NBA and it just didn't hit. And this can happen fast. And this is a lesson. I don't think any of our guys are on that path right now. So I'm not it's not a lesson specifically to any of our players, but I hope our players noticed it when he was in camp. Because that's the reality of what the NBA is. As Will Hardy says, the NBA is not stopping for you at all. I do like that. I like the Jaden Springer flyer. You've got to figure out when we're trying to sign the Kendrick Williams, Isaiah Joe type pieces, or go grab the Aaron Nesmith or the Obi Toppins or the Nickeil Alexander Walkers in Minnesota. You got to figure out who those guys are. And the release late draft pick who shot 20% from 3 and hoping he can shoot from, see if he can figure out a shot, or get him up and close and personal and find out if there's a reason why it's not working and everyone got off him. Okay, good. Second draft players like Jarice Walker's a really interesting one to watch. Without Miles Turner, he's probably going to get time, so it's not going to happen. But who are the second draft players? I wouldn't probably second draft anybody out of the Cody Williams, Isaiah Collier, Kyle Filipowski draft, because I think it might be one of the worst ever. And if a guy's not making it, I think it's just because he's not making it. But that's probably overstretching. I'd be a little, just in regards to Jarice Walker, I'd be a little careful on that whole, unless Walker was the draft before, actually. So, who are those second draft players? We'll take a look at them coming up here. See who the Nesmith or the Toppins can be. All right, that's the route for the Jazz. I'm doing this week. Leaf Tulane takes over for August, just to give you a heads up on all that. Now we send the first ever 24/7 national NBA channel, Locked On NBA, plus the daily Locked On NBA still coming at you each and every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network.